And now it is my pleasure to introduce our presenter. Suzanna Boyle, JD, is a regulatory counsel in the Division of Promotion Policy, Research and Operations within the Office of Prescription Drug Promotion, which resides in CDER's Office of Medical Policy. Now, please join me in welcoming Ms. Suzanna Boyle.
Hello, thank you for the introduction. As said, my name is Suzanna Boyle. I'm a regulatory counsel at the Food and Drug Administration in the Office of Prescription Drug Promotion within the Office of Medical Policy. I'm also the technical lead on the newly effective final rule direct-to-consumer prescription drug advertisements presentation of the major statement in a clear, conspicuous, and neutral manner in advertisements in television and radio format. And as you might have just noticed, that's quite a mouthful, so we generally refer to the rule as the Clear, Conspicuous, and Neutral Rule, or CCN, and that's how I'll be referring to it from here on out. Today, I'm going to discuss some general prescription drug promotion information, and then I'll also talk about what effect the CCN final rule has or doesn't have on prescription drug promotion. All right, so here's a roadmap for our time together. First, I'm going to give you a bit of background on the Office of Prescription Drug Promotion, or OPDP, and Prescription Drug Promotion Regulation. And then I'll take a dive into the new final rule, including, importantly, the rule's effective and compliance date. I'll discuss the rule's standards that'll be used to determine whether the major statement in certain ads is presented in a clear, conspicuous, and neutral manner, as well as providing you more of a plain language breakdown of the rule of the standards. I'll let you know what assistance FDA has to help firms with prescription drug promotion, as well as complying with the final rule. And then we'll have some time for questions. So first thing is we'll touch on some more general background. This slide gives you an orientation of the agency. The Office of Prescription Drug Promotion, OPDP, is located in the Office of Medical Policy, which is in the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, or what we call CDER. So OPDP has a diverse staff. We have pharmacist reviewers, social scientists, policy analysts, regulatory counsels, and program managers whose aim is to protect public health by helping to ensure that prescription drug promotion is truthful, balanced, and accurately communicated. And our team does this through surveillance, compliance, research, education programs, and guidance and policy writing, all aimed at fostering better communication of labeling and promotional information to both healthcare providers and consumers. So now I'd like to quickly clear up some common misconceptions regarding promotion that we see or come across. So the first is that FDA legalized direct-to-consumer DTC advertising in the late 90s, and this is not accurate. Nothing in the FD&C Act prohibited DTC advertising. FDA developed guidance in the 90s regarding how those DTC broadcast ads could satisfy the existing regulations. And those regulations allowed ads to be excused from providing comprehensive risk disclosure as long as they provided the drug's major side effects and contraindications, what we now call the major statement, as well as providing adequate provision for consumers to obtain the full prescribing information, or PI. The next misconception, and one we actually addressed in the preamble to the final rule, is that the FDA, some consumers believe the FDA does not allow drugs with serious side effects to advertise to consumers, and that's not true. There's no such limitation to promotion. Now, while the CCN final rule doesn't change the content of the risks presented to consumers in prescription drug advertisements, presenting that major statement of risk in a clear, conspicuous, and neutral manner will help consumers notice, attend to, and understand a drug's risks. Now, a common misconception we've heard is that FDA has the authority to ban DTC advertising. However, we do not. Any ban or restriction would require congressional action that would need to meet constitutional standards. There's another big misconception that FDA approves ads, and that's not true. While FDA regulates prescription drug advertising and promotion, this doesn't mean that we approve it. While firms are required to submit their ads to FDA prior to disseminating, they're not required to obtain FDA's approval of the piece. And then lastly, there's a misconception that FDA regulates good taste, and sorry, we do not. Our focus is on the content of the promotional communication, particularly whether statements regarding the drug's safety and efficacy are truthful and not misleading. So, all right, I hope you've stayed with me so far. We've touched on a little general background. Now we get into the really fun part of the regulatory background. Let's discuss some of the regulatory requirements surrounding promotion. All right, so the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act was enacted in 1938, and it requires that prescription drug promotion not be false or misleading regarding the drug's safety and effectiveness, that it includes a fair balance between the effectiveness or benefit and risk information, and that the ad reveals material facts about the product being promoted, including facts about consequences resulting from using the drug as suggested in the promotion. Now, the FD&C Act is also where FDA gets the authority to create regulations. These regulations provide the details on how the law is to be followed. And you can find FDA regulations under Title 21 of the Code of Federal Regulations. The bulk of them are found at 21 CFR 202.1 for advertising or 21 CFR 201.100 for labeling. There are other provisions scattered throughout. One of those regulations is found at 21 CFR 314.81B3, and that regulation requires the submission of all promotional communications to the FDA at the time of initial dissemination or publication. So let's say a firm is creating a new website or a TV ad. So the promotional communication must be submitted to FDA. It must be submitted along with Form FDA 2253 and the drug's recent PI when the website is published or the TV ad begins airing. So notice a couple things. Notice, first of all, that I didn't say the requirement is to submit before the piece is published or goes live. And then another item to notice is that I said submitted, not approved. If you remember a few moments ago during the common misconceptions part, there's no requirement for the approval of promotional communications. I want to take a second here real quick to note that OPDP offers firms the opportunity to voluntarily submit promotional communications to our office for comments prior to use. So I'll go into this a little bit more when we discuss FDA resources. I just wanted to put that nugget in your head. So now that we've touched on our authority to regulate, let's see what it is that OPDP actually regulates. So OPDP activity generally focuses on promotional communications for human prescription drugs issued by or on behalf of manufacturers, packers, and distributors. So that means OPDP considers materials aimed not only at consumers, but also at healthcare providers and at payers, for example, insurers, formulary committees. So I've listed some examples here on the slides. Notice, though, that OPDP does not regulate the promotion of over-the-counter drugs, compounded drugs, drugs for animals, dietary supplements, devices, certain biological products, foods, or cosmetics. So those products are regulated, the promotion for those products are regulated by other areas within CDER, other centers in FDA, or other agencies outside of FDA, such as the FTC. Promotional communications can be broken down into a few categories. When we think of prescription drug advertising or promotion, we're generally thinking of product claim communications. They're the most common. Product claim communications generally include the name of the drug, information about approved indications, and the drug's benefits and risks. Some examples would be sales aids, television ads, slide decks, product websites, and like mailing pieces that talk about a specific drug. Now, this is the category of promotion that's subject to the CCN final rule. However, there are a few other categories of promotional communications I want to touch on quickly. Generally, these other communications are not subject to the same requirements regarding disclosure of the product's effectiveness and risks that we see for product claim communications, but they're also very limited in the amount and type of information they contain. A second category of promotional communications, reminder ads, include specific product names, but they don't include representations or specific uses related to the product. Reminder ads will include the proprietary and established names of the drug. Those are also called the brand and generic names. They can include the dosage, form, package contents, price, and the name of the manufacturer, packer, or distributor, but they do not include indications, dosage recommendations for use, or other written, printed, or graphic representations or suggestions related to the drug product. Reminder ads are not required to include risk information. So an important caveat is that reminder promotion is not permitted for drugs that carry a boxed warning, or sometimes called a black box warning. Boxed warnings appear on a prescription drug's label and are designed to call attention to serious or life-threatening risks. If a drug carries a boxed warning, it's the most prominent warning in the labeling. Other categories of promotion include help-seeking and institutional promotional communications. These don't make any representations about a specific product. Help-seeking, or otherwise called like disease awareness ads, will discuss a particular disease or resources for patients with a particular disease. They'd include the name of the company, but they wouldn't make reference to a specific product or drug. Institutional communications will generally include a company name and areas of research, but they wouldn't mention any specific drug names. So, all right, we now know there are product claim communications, reminder ads, help-seeking ads, and institutional ads. I think it's helpful to show you how these categories look in use. Now, these are going to be print ads, but the ideas can be extrapolated to TV or radio. So we're going to have a fictitious product from a fictitious firm. So the drug's brand name is arbitrary, and I did not create this generic name, otherwise it would be easier to pronounce, but its established name is Mizvastadium, and it comes in 100 milligram tablets. Arbitrary is manufactured by Ace Pharmaceuticals, and it's indicated to treat seasonal allergy symptoms in adults. So just by the way, I'm going to show you some sample ads for the next few slides, and all of those pieces can be found on the FDA website. So if you go to fda.gov and search sample prescription drug ads, you'll be able to find these. So let's see how they could look. All right, so here's a sample product claim ad directed towards consumers or patients. So as I mentioned, you can find this on the FDA website. Now, if you were on the site, you'd be able to click next to all the different numbers, and it might be helpful for you if you're looking at how to create pieces. For our benefit, I'm just going to point out some relevant numbers for you. So number 1 shows you the drug's brand and generic name. Number 2, you see indication, FDA approved indication, in this case, treatment of seasonal allergy symptoms. Next to number 4, you'll see a fair balance of the drug's risk and benefit information. So the drug can reduce allergy symptoms for up to 24 hours, but users may also experience headaches, cold symptoms, etc. while using the drug. So here's a reminder ad. If you see here, the reminder ad includes next to number 2 the brand and generic names, but you notice the ad does not describe the indication, nor does it provide a dosage recommendation. And here's a help-seeking ad. Next to number 2, you'll see symptoms of the indication, right? Runny nose, sneezing. But the ad also includes next to number 4 the name of the company, but nowhere do you see the name of the drug or specific drug product. So if it did include a specific drug name and was disseminated by or on behalf of the drug's manufacturer, packer, or distributor, this could be considered a product claim piece, because then, of course, the audience would associate the drug with use in seasonal allergies. These types of drugs or ads help seeking or disease awareness may also be subject to regulations by other agencies like FTC. So our site does not include a fictional representation of an institutional ad because we wouldn't regulate it. So unfortunately, I am not exceptionally creative. So here you go. This would include an institutional ad, would include the name of the company, in this case, Ace Pharmaceuticals, and then areas of research. So, which in our case would be like seasonal allergies or maybe even the individual symptoms of seasonal allergies. So now we've seen the different categories. Let's focus on the category subject to CCN, and that's the product claim communications. So as I mentioned, the most common type of material C is probably is familiar with, right? They mention a specific drug product and they make claims regarding its use. So because of that, the regulations require that these communications not be false or misleading regarding the drug's side effects, contraindications, and effectiveness. The regs also require that the communications reveal material facts regarding consequences of using the drug, and that the communication include a fair balance, a balanced presentation between risk and benefit. So now balance depends on two things, not just the content of the information, but also how the information is presented. So product claim communications must be accompanied by the PI, prescribing information, or a brief summary of the risks associated with using the drug as prescribed. However, the regs do allow for TV and radio ads to present the major side effects and contraindications of the advertised drug instead of the brief summary or PI, as long as the communications provide consumers ways to obtain that PI or package labeling. So, most people kind of have an idea of what prescribing information is. It's sometimes called package labeling or package insert. It's that insert that's given to patients when they fill a prescription. It lists all of the details for taking the drug, including all of the risks, as well as the drug's chemistry and clinical trial information. So the brief summary, on the other hand, is included in print advertisements, and generally it's a disclosure of at least one approved use, the drug's indication and contraindications, warnings and precautions, possible serious side effects, and then frequently occurring side effects. So now we've discussed different categories of communications, and I'll let you know that the new rule is limited to product claim communications. Before we talk about what's in the new rule, let's discuss what the regulation looked like before the 2007 amendment to the FD&C Act. So the regulation found at 21 CFR 202.1E implements the requirement of the FD&C Act's Section 502N that all prescription drug advertising include a brief summary relating to the drug's side effects, contraindications, and effectiveness. So while 202.1E implemented that brief summary requirement of 502N, 202.1E1 required that prescription drug advertisements for human and veterinary products that broadcast through media such as radio, TV, or telephone communications include information relating to major side effects and contraindications of the advertised drug in the audio or audio and visual parts of the presentation. All right, so then how did we get here? So the Food and Drug Administration Act of 2007 amended the FD&C Act, Section 502N, what we were just discussing. Specifically, 502N now also requires that drugs subject to Section 503b1, that means human prescription drugs, that are presented direct to consumers in TV or radio format, that state the name of the drug and its conditions of use. The major statement relating to side effects and contraindications is presented in a clear, conspicuous, and neutral manner. So while FDA changed the requirements under 502N, it did not make clear what those requirements for clear, conspicuous, and neutral should be. So FDA was actually directed to establish those standards. And now the clear, conspicuous, and neutral final rule is the result of that FDA directive. All right, so the CCN rule issued in November of 2023, and it amends the regulation that is located at 21 CFR 22.1E1. The final rule requires that for certain ads for human prescription drugs that are presented directly to consumer in TV or radio format, the major statement relating to side effects and contraindications is presented in a clear, conspicuous, and neutral manner. Unlike the statutory language, the final rule doesn't include the clause stating the name of the drug and its conditions of use, as it's located in another regulation, in another section of the regulation, and is unaffected by CCN. So I'm going to provide you the 5 standards that are going to be used to independently and collectively determine whether a DTC, TV, or radio ad complies with the final rules, and then I'll provide you a more plain language version of the standards. But first, we're going to look at which ads are subject to CCN. So, CCN requirement is for ads for human prescription drugs that are presented directly to consumer in television or radio format, and that state the name of the drug and its conditions of use. That's also called the product claim communications. So what it means is that print ads are not subject to CCN. Ads directed at healthcare providers are not subject to CCN, neither are veterinary prescription drugs. But those ads still need to comply with the relevant regulations. They just don't need to be compliant with CCN. Now, of course, we'd note that by voluntarily communicating that in the major statement in a clear, conspicuous, and neutral manner, even for those drugs or for those ads, would enhance consumer comprehension and lead to better informed decisions regarding those drugs. Now, you may be wondering when your ads need to be compliant with CCN. As I noted, the final rule published in the Federal Register in November of 2023, and the rule became effective on May 2024. That means as of May 20th of 2024, it is now the rule. All ads that are subject to the clear, conspicuous, and neutral final rule must be compliant with the rule on November 20, 2024. Of course, FDA recommends that firms ensure their ads are brought into compliance as soon as possible. Now, you may be wondering why we have a separate effective and compliance date. The proposed rule included a single 90-day effective and compliance date. And in our rulemaking, we received comments supporting a shorter period, as well as comments stating that a longer period may be required in order for different stages of ad campaigns. We recognize that this rule could impact existing ads in productions, and as well as distribution agreements. So we believe that providing an effective date of May 20th of 2024 and a compliance date of November 20, 2024 enables firms to bring all ads that are subject to the rule into compliance, regardless of where those ads may be in their life cycle. Now, we've discussed the types of ads that are subject to CCN, but it's important to understand what in the ad must be clear, conspicuous, and neutral. What is the major statement? The major statement is a term referring to the major side effects and contraindications of a prescription drug. It includes information about side effects, warnings, precautions, and contraindications, but it's not a listing of every risk. One thing I'd like to note is this major statement requirement is not new. FDA regulations already required inclusion of the information relating to the major side effects and contraindications in prescription drug ads broadcast through media such as television, radio, and telephone communication systems. And this regulation does not change the requirement that DTC, TV, and radio ads that present the major statement instead of the brief summary, which can be substantially shorter, need to include a way for consumers to obtain the full prescribing information elsewhere, what we call adequate provision. It's important to note that the CCN final rule does not change the content of the major statement. The rule addresses the manner of presentation of the major statement. All right, first we determined what ads need to be compliant with CCN. Second, we narrowed down what part of the ad needs to comply with the rule, and now we'll get to the meat. As I previously noted, FDA required that FDA create standards to determine whether a major statement is in fact presented in a clear, conspicuous, and neutral manner. I'm going to tick through the standards quickly as they're written in the rule because I think it's important to hear the regulatory language, but then we'll go through each of the standards more slowly afterwards. So in all of these, in the next few ads, you'll see it, and that is as it is written in the regulation. It in each of these slides represents the major statement. So number one, it is presented in consumer-friendly language and terms that are readily understandable. Number two, it's audio information in terms of the volume, articulation, and pacing is at least as understandable as the audio information presented in the rest of the advertisement. Number three, in advertisements in television format, it is presented concurrently using both audio and text, dual modality. To achieve dual modality, either the text displays the verbatim key terms or phrases from the corresponding audio, or the text displays a verbatim complete transcript of the corresponding audio, and B, the text is displayed for a sufficient duration to allow it to be read easily. For purposes of this standard, the duration is considered sufficient if the text display begins at the same time and ends at approximately the same time as the corresponding audio. 4, in advertisements in television format, for the text portion of the major statement, the size and style of font, the contrast with the background, and the placement on the screen allow the information to be read easily. 5, during the presentation of the major statement, the advertisement does not include audio or visual elements, alone or in combination, that are likely to interfere with comprehension of the major statement. So I know that's a lot of regulatory language, so we'll go through each of the standards a bit more in depth now. All right, how can firms comply with Standard 1? Standard 1 requires the major statement is presented in consumer-friendly language and terminology that's readily understandable. That means firms should use terms that are directed towards consumers and limit those medical and technical terms that are directed more towards healthcare providers. A major statement should avoid vague language or terminology that's subject to different interpretations easily. One thing that Standard 1 does not do is specify or require that the major statement is presented in a particular reading level, and you may wonder why we didn't require a particular grade level requirement. And we received comments regarding particular grade level requirements in our comments. However, as we noted in the preamble to the final rule, we recognize that it may be necessary for the major statement to include certain terms. We use the particular disease state, tuberculosis, that can result in a relatively high grade level rating. So Standard 2 requires the audio in the major statement be as understandable as the audio in the rest of the ad in terms of the volume, articulation, and pacing. And one way to comply would be for firms to compare those factors, that volume, articulation, and pacing, in the major statement's audio and ensure that it's at least as understandable as the audio in the rest of the ad. Okay, standard 3. This is the dual modality standard. It requires that in TV ads, the major statement is presented in audio and text concurrently. Since there are a couple moving parts to the dual modality standard, I've broken them apart for the next 2 slides. The first prong of dual modality is regarding what the text displays. To achieve dual modality, firms can use either the verbatim key terms or phrases from the corresponding audio, or they can use the entire verbatim transcript of the corresponding audio. So for example, if the audio states the most common side effects of drug X are dry mouth, headache, and heartburn, the corresponding text could include that entire sentence, or the text could display dry mouth, headache, heartburn. Now, the second prong of dual modality is the duration of the text display. The rule states the text duration is displayed for a sufficient time to be read easily, and to achieve this, that the text begin at the same time and end at approximately the same time as the corresponding audio. This should be considered from when the audio begins, and firms should keep in mind that standard 2 regarding the understandable audio in the major statement still needs to be met while achieving dual modality. Now, a question we received in our comment periods, and one you may have now, is will the dual modality standard necessarily cause TV ads for human prescription drugs to be longer? No. To satisfy dual modality, the rule doesn't require that the entire verbatim transcript of the audio portion of the major statement is presented on the screen. Instead, the rule provides flexibility to firms and gives the option that verbatim key terms and phrases from the audio may be used instead. In addition, the duration of display of the text portion is considered sufficient if it begins at the same time and ends at approximately the same time as the corresponding audio. So for standard 4 in TV ads, for the text portion of the major statement, the standard states that it is easily readable in regards to size and style of font, contrast with the background, and placement on the screen. So remember, this applies to the major statement presentation and not to other text in the ad. And the standard doesn't require a specific size of font, etc. What it does require is that the presentation of the text when combined is easily readable. And then standard 5, for the major statement, to be clear, conspicuous, and neutral, the major statement presentation does not include audio or visual elements alone or in combination that are likely to interfere with the major statement's comprehension. So again, this applies only during the major statement presentation, and the standard does not prohibit firms from having music play in the background, for example, during the major statement's presentation, nor does it prescribe the type of music that can be played during the major statement. But to be clear, conspicuous, and neutral, the music does not interfere with the comprehension of the major statement. So firms will need to analyze all of the standards to ensure that the major statement in their ads comply with the rule. All right, now that we've gone through all 5 of the standards, you may be thinking to yourselves, do all of the standards apply to our ads to be considered clear, conspicuous, and neutral? The answer is yes, if your ad is in television format. If you create a DTC human prescription drug ad in TV format that is subject to CCN, all 5 standards will be considered for determining clear, conspicuous, and neutral. If, however, you create a DTC human prescription drug ad in radio format that's subject to CCN, standards 1, 2, and 5 apply, and this is simply due to the visual elements that are in television versus radio. We narrowed down the types of ads that the clear, conspicuous, and neutral rule applies to. We addressed the part of the ad the rule applies to, and then we went through each of the standards in the rule that will be used to determine whether a major statement is presented in a clear, conspicuous, and neutral manner. That's a lot of information, and I truly appreciate your attention. We do have resources available to help you with your understanding and with applying the final rule, and we'll go through those now. The first resource is the Small Entity Compliance Guide. This was published to help small entities comply with the CCN final rule. We think it's helpful for all firms, not just small ones. I believe this will be your most useful resource, and I really recommend using it. Unlike the regulatory language in the rule, the SECG provides information in language that's easier to understand. Another useful CCN resource is on the OPDP homepage. We have a specific section to CCN questions in our frequently asked questions. So here's a resource not specific to CCN, but it's definitely helpful, and I mentioned it towards the top of the presentation. If anyone's unfamiliar with this, FDA has reviewers available to provide comments on proposed promotional communications. It's done upon request from firms prior to disseminating the piece. CDER's OPDP and CBER's APLB have different procedures, so I definitely recommend reviewing this guidance document before submitting anything. And then additional resources, so CDER's OPDP and CBER's APLB review advertising and promotional labeling. OPDP reviews promotion of prescription drugs. OPDP's main page, where you can find resources, news, and frequently asked questions regarding promotion of prescription drugs, is very helpful. APLB regulates promotion of licensed biological products, including vaccines, allergenic extracts, blood products, gene therapy products. There's the APLB webpage, homepage. They have resources specific to biologic advertising and promotion. All right, I know that was a lot, and again, I very much appreciate you sticking with me here. To summarize what you've heard, the clear, conspicuous, and neutral final rule requires that human prescription drug ads presented directly to consumers in TV or radio format. The major side effects and contraindications, aka the major statement, must be presented in a clear, conspicuous, and neutral manner. Ads that are subject to the rule must be compliant by November 20, 2024. And if you have any questions about your ads, please reach out to your reviewers. They're happy to provide comments on your ads before you disseminate them. So thank you for joining me today. I hope I was able to provide some helpful information regarding prescription drug promotion and the CCN final rule. Are there any questions?
All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Boyle, for the excellent presentation. We will now begin our question and answer session. If you haven't had a chance to enter your question into the Q&A chat pod, please do so now, and we'll answer as many questions as time allows. All right, so we see some questions coming in. We'll start with this first question. I work at an ad agency. I'm not sure which of my clients this rule applies to. Can you explain?
Hi, sorry about that. Thank you very much. That's a great question. The clear, conspicuous, and neutral rule applies to the manufacturers, packers, and distributors of those human prescription drugs that advertise directly to consumers in TV or radio format. So remember, as I mentioned in the presentation, this doesn't apply to ads for veterinary drugs. So just those manufacturers, packers, and distributors of human prescription drugs. Thanks again for the question.
Thank you again for that response. Now we'll move on to the next question. How do I know if my ad is using consumer-friendly language? Can you give more clarity around consumer-friendly language? And that is there a certain age or school grade to guide industry?
Sorry, I clicked the wrong button. So thank you for the question. That's a good question. As I noted, as far as grade level, as I noted in the presentation, we recognize that certain words may be necessary during an advertisement. Like I had mentioned there, the particular disease state, tuberculosis. Sometimes things like that, we understand those are just going to have to be there. They're necessary, and they could result in a relatively high grade level rating. Now, the idea behind the standard is to provide the major statements risk information in a way that's understandable to the ordinary consumer, and while still providing manufacturers with the flexibility to design their ads. So we know every drug is different, and we don't expect manufacturers to test every word intended to be used in an ad. I would say, if you're looking for consumer-friendly language, a great place to start would be a med guide or PPI if your drug has one. Thank you.
Thank you again for that clarification. Now we'll move on to another question that came in. For Standard 3, can we use synonyms of the words from the voiceover in the super?
Thank you. I appreciate the question. So for this one, the answer is simply no. The dual modality standard requires the verbatim key terms or phrases or the entire verbatim transcript from the corresponding audio. So synonyms would not be compliant with the standard. But thanks for the question.
Thank you again for that response. See, we have some more questions that came in. Here's our next one. If my client has a drug with very few side effects, do they have to include those in a TV or radio ad?
So, wow, thank you for the great question. So the short answer is yes. If you remember when we were discussing product claims ads, the regulations require a fair balance of information about a drug's risk compared with information about a drug's benefits. What this means is that the content and presentation of a drug's most important risks, even if there are only a few risks, must be reasonably similar to the content and presentation of its benefits. So this doesn't mean that equal time and space must be given to risks and benefits in ads that are in TV or radio format. I mean, every drug is different. The amount of time or space needed to present risk information will depend on the drug's risks and the way that both the benefits and risks are presented. So the answer to your question is that all ads need a fair balance of risks and benefits to be presented in TV or radio ads, even if they have very few side effects. Thank you for that question.
All right, thanks again, Suzanna. We're seeing a lot of questions now regarding how this rule applies to other platforms like social media and connected TV. Can you speak to that?
So thank you. That's an interesting question. So, we know that technology is advanced and TV and radio ads can be shown on more and different devices, and they can be disseminated through a broader range of platforms than was available when FDA published the proposed rule. But we think, that fundamentally, the attributes of communication affecting whether an audience will comprehend risk information in an ad are the same, no matter the technology that delivers it. We'd also mention that based on what's been submitted to us, as I mentioned, the regulation 314.81, the ads that have been submitted to us on those forms 2253, firms haven't develop distinct ads for new devices or new platforms. Their ads are essentially the same. But thank you for bringing up those questions.
Great. Thank you again for that response. And we'll now move on to another question that we have coming in. Does the audio speed in the major statement have to be identical to the audio speed in the rest of the ad?
Wow, thank you. Thank you for that great question. So the requirement in Standard 2 is that the audio information in the major statement is at least as understandable regarding the volume, articulation, and pacing as the audio in the rest of the ad. Not that it has to be identical to the audio in the rest of the ad. Our intention is to ensure that the presentation of the risk information in the audio can be understood. You know, since firms have an incentive to ensure that a drug's benefits are understood in an ad, you know, they want to make sure that a consumer understands what the drug's benefits are. Using those same attributes for the risk in the major statement is a concrete way for firms to help ensure that the risks are understood. So, no, the audio speed in the major statement does not need to be identical to the audio speed in the rest of the ad. So long as the major statement audio is as understandable as the audio in the rest of the ad. It's important not to forget, though, that you also have to consider the other two attributes, the pacing and articulation. They all work together and are all assessed together. So it's important that all of the attributes are considered for Standard 2. Thank you for asking that.
Right. Thank you so much for all that information as well. That's really helpful. Now we have another question that came in. For the last standard, do we have to present the major statement without any additional images in that part of the ad?
So thank you. That's something it's very interesting that we received similar questions during the rulemaking. So we've actually seen this a couple times. No, that's not our intent. The fifth standard regarding audio and visual elements not interfering with the comprehension of the major statement doesn't prohibit creative elements, whether those elements are audio or visual. We know that sometimes multiple elements can be used to reinforce the presentation of risk information. You know, that's why we have the dual modality requirement. We get that. The standard, though, is meant to help ensure that there are no elements, whether audio, visual, or a combination of those, that distract from the presentation of the risk information. It adds to the other standards to help ensure that consumers notice, attend to, and understand the major statement. So there's no requirement that the major statement be presented without any additional images, to actually answer your question. Thanks for that.
Thank you again for that response. So on to the next question. Considering consumers can't get these drugs without a doctor prescribing them, isn't this rule unnecessary?
All right. Well, thank you for that interesting question. We disagree that the rule is unnecessary. Consumers are frequently exposed to DTC, direct-to-consumer, TV and radio ads, talking about the benefits of a prescription drug. They see those ads both before their contact with a healthcare provider, as well as after that contact with a healthcare provider. So the rule helps ensure consumers are better informed when they participate in healthcare decision-making. For example, we discussed in the preamble of the final rule, patients taking a drug will be informed of the side effects each time they see the ad. They're taking the drug, they're still seeing the ad, and they're seeing the side effects. That's important, considering there are certain side effects that can occur at any time. So, by that, we'd say that the rule is actually necessary. But thank you for your question.
And thank you again for that response. We still have questions coming in. Okay, here's our next one for you, Susanna. Wouldn't requiring a specific font size have been better for reading?
So thank you. Thank you for that question. So, as I mentioned during the presentation, we considered comments we received during rulemaking. And we concluded that there's more than one way to present the text information, the textual information that'll allow text to be read easily. In the preamble, we noted that increasing the amount of contrast between the font and the background may improve readability, and that even at a smaller size, some styles of font are more easily read than others. So our intention with this rule is to help consumers to be able to notice and understand a drug's risk while being flexible enough to allow for a variety of techniques for firms to use or may choose to use. Thank you for your question, though.
Great. Thank you again for that response as well. Now, we're noticing a lot of questions asking about the compliance date. Would you please remind our attendees when the compliance date is?
Sure. Let's see here. So the rule is effective now. It actually exists. It is effective today. It became effective on May 20th of 2024. Ads that are subject to the rule, that is those human prescription drug ads stating the name of the drug and its conditions of use, again, product claim communications, that are presented directly to consumer in television or radio format must be compliant by November 20 of 2024. The compliance date is November 20, 2024. I would like to remind you, while I'm on the compliance date, check out the FDA website for resources, the resources I discussed in the presentation. Those are specific to CCN, including the frequently asked questions, as well as the small entity compliance guide. Make sure you check that out. But also the other resources I gave you, check those out. And also, one thing I didn't note in the presentation, FDA has all kinds of guidance documents available that'll help you in preparing prescription drug promotion, from risk presentation to effectiveness, anything you can think, well, not anything, obviously, you can think of, but please make sure you check out all of our resources that we have available. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. It looks like that is all the questions we have time for. Thank you again, Suzanne Boyle, for all the excellent information you've provided today and all your responses to the various questions we've had as well.